What if the greatest obstacles to your clarity and success weren't external, but cleverly disguised traps laid by your own mind? Every day, subtle errors in thinking lead countless individuals astray, shaping decisions, distorting perceptions, and ultimately, crafting realities far from what they could achieve. These aren't random missteps. They are predictable patterns, ancient vulnerabilities hardwired into our cognitive architecture, operating just beneath the surface of our awareness. This isn't about intellectual horsepower or academic training. These mental pitfalls ensnare the brilliant and the ordinary alike, often when the stakes are highest. From the seemingly trivial choices that accumulate over a lifetime to the monumental decisions that define our path, these hidden biases silently dictate outcomes. The question isn't if your thinking is affected, but how profoundly, and what undiscovered potential remains locked away because of them. Imagine possessing a key, a way to unlock these mental cages and see the world and your own thoughts with newfound precision. These cognitive errors, though pervasive, are not invincible. They follow discernible rules, and understanding these rules is the first step towards dismantling their influence. This journey is about illuminating these hidden mechanisms, the 7 critical errors that cloud judgment universally. We will venture beyond mere identification. For each of these 7 critical thinking mistakes, we will unearth not only why they occur, their ancient psychological roots, but also practical, actionable strategies to counteract them. This isn't just an exploration of flaws. It's an empowering guide to sharpening your perception, refining your reasoning, and reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty. The ability to think clearly, to dissect arguments, evaluate evidence, and make sound judgments is more than a skill. It is the bedrock of a conscious, well-lived life. By learning to recognize these 7 pervasive errors, you are not just correcting mistakes, you are forging a more resilient, insightful, and discerning mind. Our exploration begins now. Critical thinking is the art of analyzing information objectively, free from personal bias or emotional sway, to form a reasoned judgment. It's the essential compass for navigating a world saturated with information, misinformation, and competing narratives. Without it, we are adrift, susceptible to manipulation and poor decision-making in every facet of our existence, from personal relationships to global affairs. At the heart of flawed reasoning lie cognitive biases, systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment. These are not signs of low intelligence, but rather mental shortcuts, or heuristics, that our brains have evolved to make quick assessments. While often useful for survival in simpler times, in our complex modern world, these shortcuts frequently lead us down paths of error. The first, and perhaps most insidious, of these errors is confirmation bias. This is our natural tendency to seek out, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. We subconsciously filter out contradictory evidence, creating an echo chamber that reinforces our current worldview, regardless of its accuracy. Why does confirmation bias occur? It's deeply rooted in our desire for cognitive consistency and the comfort of being right. Challenging our beliefs requires significant mental effort and can evoke discomfort, a state known as cognitive dissonance. It's often easier and more psychologically rewarding to find information that supports what we already think, creating a self-affirming loop. Consider an individual who believes a certain ancient remedy is effective. They will avidly consume anecdotes and testimonials supporting its efficacy, while dismissing or rationalizing away scientific studies that find no benefit. This isn't necessarily intentional deception, but the mind's mechanism to protect its established framework of understanding, even if that framework is flawed. To fix confirmation bias, one must actively play devil's advocate with oneself. Intentionally seek out reputable sources and well-reasoned arguments that challenge your current perspectives. Ask, what evidence would convince me I am wrong? This proactive search for disconfirming evidence is crucial for breaking free from self-imposed intellectual bubbles and fostering genuine understanding. Another powerful strategy is to consider the opposite. Before concluding, spend time genuinely arguing for the opposing viewpoint. Try to build the strongest possible case against your own belief. This mental exercise forces engagement with alternative perspectives and highlights potential weaknesses in your initial reasoning, fostering a more balanced assessment. Next, we encounter the anchoring bias. This cognitive trap describes our tendency to rely too heavily on the very first piece of information offered, the anchor, when making decisions. Subsequent judgments and information are then interpreted and adjusted around this initial anchor, even if the anchor itself is arbitrary or irrelevant. Anchoring occurs because our minds seek a starting point. The initial piece of information provides this, and we tend to make insufficient adjustments from that point, even when presented with new data. It's like dropping an anchor in a negotiation. The first offer often sets the range for the entire discussion, heavily influencing the final outcome. Imagine you're estimating the population of an unfamiliar ancient city. If asked, is it more or less than 50,000? Your estimate will likely be closer to 50,000 than if the anchor question was, is it more or less than 500,000? The initial number, even if randomly generated, subtly tethers your subsequent reasoning process. To counteract anchoring bias, the first step is awareness. Recognize when an initial piece of information might be unduly influencing you. Then, actively seek out alternative starting points or benchmarks before making a judgment. Consciously question the validity and relevance of the initial anchor itself. Is it based on solid evidence or just an arbitrary figure? Another fix is to generate your own estimate or opinion before being exposed to others' anchors. If you are negotiating, decide your ideal price and walk-away point before hearing the other party's offer. This pre-commitment helps to reduce the pull of their initial anchor, allowing for a more independent and reasoned assessment. Our third cognitive misstep is the availability heuristic. This mental shortcut leads us to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled in our memory. If something comes to mind quickly, perhaps because it's recent, vivid, or emotionally charged, we tend to assume it's more common or important than it actually is. The availability heuristic happens because our minds equate ease of recall with frequency or probability. Dramatic events reported extensively in ancient chronicles, or personal experiences that were particularly frightening or memorable, stick in our minds. We then use this ease of retrieval as a proxy for how often such things actually occur, often leading to skewed perceptions of risk and reality. For instance, after hearing several vivid accounts of attacks by bandits on a certain road, travelers might vastly overestimate the actual danger of that route compared to other, less talked about perils like disease or accidents within city walls, which might be statistically more prevalent but less dramatically recalled. To combat the availability heuristic, actively seek out objective data and statistics rather than relying solely on memorable anecdotes or recent events. When making a judgment, ask yourself, am I basing this on easily recalled examples or on broader evidence? Deliberately try to recall less vivid but potentially more relevant information. Consider a wider range of possibilities and evidence. If you're assessing risk, don't just think about the most dramatic examples. Systematically explore base rates and less sensational data points. This helps to dilute the impact of highly available but potentially unrepresentative information, leading to more accurate assessments. The fourth error is the bandwagon effect, also known as herd mentality. This is the tendency to do or believe things because many other people do or believe the same. The perceived popularity of an idea or action can override an individual's own judgment, as we often equate mass agreement with correctness or safety. The bandwagon effect stems from our innate social nature and the desire for conformity and belonging. In ancient times, going along with the tribe was often crucial for survival. This ingrained tendency means we often use the actions of others as a guide for our own behavior, especially in ambiguous situations, assuming that if many people are doing it, it must be the right thing to do. Think of fashions in ancient courts, or the rapid spread of certain popular beliefs or superstitions through a medieval populace. Once an idea gains momentum and is adopted by a visible majority, others may adopt it too, not necessarily because they've critically evaluated it, but because it seems to be the prevailing view. To resist the bandwagon effect, cultivate independent thought. Before adopting a belief or action, ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely agree with it or because it's popular? Separate the merit of an idea from its popularity. Remember that truth is not determined by majority vote. Actively seek out dissenting opinions or minority viewpoints. Understanding why some people don't follow the crowd can provide valuable insights and reveal flaws in the popular consensus that may not be immediately apparent. This practice encourages a more thorough evaluation before committing to a widely held belief or action. Moving into the realm of logical fallacies, we find the straw man fallacy. This occurs when someone misrepresents, exaggerates, or distorts an opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. Instead of addressing the actual position, they attack a weaker, fabricated version, the straw man, and then claim victory over the original argument. The straw man fallacy is a common tactic in debates and discussions, often used to avoid engaging with the substance of a complex argument. It's easier to defeat a caricature than a well-reasoned position. This fallacy derails productive discourse by shifting focus from genuine points of contention to irrelevant distortions. For instance, if a scholar argues for re-evaluating certain historical interpretations based on new archaeological evidence, an opponent might counter by saying, "So you're saying all our revered ancestors were liars, and everything we know is wrong?" This distorts the original nuanced argument into an easily dismissible extreme, a classic straw man. To avoid committing or falling for the straw man fallacy, strive for accurate representation. When engaging with an opposing view, make an effort to state it in its strongest, most charitable form before critiquing it. This practice, known as steelmaning, fosters more honest and productive dialogue by ensuring you are addressing the real argument. If you suspect someone is using a straw man against you, calmly and clearly restate your original position. Point out the misrepresentation without becoming overly defensive. For example, "My actual point was not X, but rather Y, which concerns." This helps to bring the discussion back to the substantive issues at hand. The sixth critical thinking error is the ad hominem fallacy. Translated from Latin as "to the person," this fallacy occurs when someone attacks the character, motive, or some other attribute of the person making an argument, rather than attacking the substance of the argument itself. It's a diversionary tactic that sidesteps intellectual engagement. Ad hominem attacks are common when one lacks a strong counterargument or wishes to discredit an opponent emotionally. By shifting focus to the person, the attacker hopes to undermine their credibility, and by extension, their argument, without actually addressing its merits. This fallacy poisons rational discourse and often appeals to prejudice. For example, if a philosopher proposes a new ethical framework, an opponent might retort, "How can we take ethical advice from someone who was once accused of minor scholarly plagiarism in their youth?" This attacks the philosopher's past, not the philosophical framework itself. The argument's validity is independent of the arguer's perceived flaws. To counter the ad hominem fallacy, steadfastly focus on the argument's logic and evidence, not the person presenting it. If attacked personally, one might say, "While my personal attributes are being discussed, they don't address the merits of the argument itself. Let's return to the core issues." This redirects the conversation back to substance. Similarly, be vigilant against using ad hominem attacks yourself, even when provoked or when an opponent seems disreputable. Upholding the principle of addressing the argument, not the arguer, maintains the integrity of the discussion and models sound critical thinking for others. It also prevents you from dismissing potentially valid points due to personal dislike. Our seventh and final critical thinking mistake is the false dichotomy, also known as the false dilemma or either-or fallacy. This occurs when a situation is presented as having only two mutually exclusive options, when in reality, there are other possibilities, alternatives, or nuanced positions that are not being considered. The false dichotomy simplifies complex issues into an overly simplistic choice, often forcing an us versus them, or all or nothing mentality. This can be a deliberate persuasive tactic to corner an opponent or rally support by making one option seem like the only viable alternative to something clearly undesirable. Consider a historical debate. Either we adhere strictly to every ancient tradition without question, or we abandon our heritage entirely and descend into chaos. This presents only two extreme options, ignoring the possibility of selectively preserving valuable traditions while adapting or reforming others, or finding new paths forward. To combat the false dichotomy, always ask, are these really the only two options? Actively brainstorm other possibilities, even if they seem less obvious. Challenge the premise that the choices are mutually exclusive. Look for nuance, compromise, or entirely different approaches that have been overlooked. Remember that reality is rarely black and white. It's most often a spectrum of grays. By rejecting false dichotomies, we open our minds to more creative, comprehensive, and often more effective solutions and understandings. This requires a willingness to embrace complexity and resist the allure of easy, oversimplified answers. These 7 critical thinking mistakes, confirmation bias, anchoring bias, availability heuristic, bandwagon effect, straw man, ad hominem, and false dichotomy, represent common pathways to flawed reasoning. They are not isolated errors but interconnected tendencies of the human mind, subtle yet powerful in their influence. Understanding these biases and fallacies is like acquiring a new set of lenses through which to view the world and our own thought processes. It allows us to see the hidden architecture of persuasion, the subtle flaws in arguments, and the unconscious influences shaping our judgments and decisions every single day. The fixes we've explored, seeking disconfirming evidence, questioning initial anchors, looking for objective data, thinking independently, representing arguments fairly, focusing on substance, and exploring multiple options, are not merely intellectual exercises. They are practical tools for navigating life with greater wisdom and efficacy. The journey to improved critical thinking is continuous. It requires humility, the acceptance that we are all susceptible to these errors. It demands vigilance, the constant, conscious effort to monitor our own thinking. And it necessitates courage, the bravery to challenge our own cherished beliefs and to stand for reason even when it's unpopular. Awareness, as we've emphasized, is the crucial first step. By simply knowing these patterns exist, you are already better equipped to recognize them in yourself and in others. This recognition creates a pause, a moment of reflection where you can choose a more reasoned path over an automatic, biased reaction. The goal is not to achieve a perfectly rational, machine-like mind, for our humanity lies also in our intuitions and emotions. Rather, the aim is to cultivate a more discerning mind, one that can distinguish between sound reasoning and deceptive shortcuts, thereby making more informed choices and fostering deeper understanding. By consciously applying these counter-strategies, you empower yourself to break free from common cognitive traps. This enhances not only your decision-making and problem-solving abilities, but also your capacity to engage in more meaningful dialogue, to better understand complex issues, and to navigate the sea of information with greater confidence and clarity. As you move forward from this exploration, carry with you the central question: how can I identify and avoid these common errors in my own thinking and reasoning today? Let this inquiry be a guiding light, illuminating the path towards a more examined, insightful, and ultimately, a more liberated mind. The unexamined thought, like an unlit path, holds unseen perils,